Hey everyone, it's Lisa Mears here, and today we are going to be making some Halloween cupcakes, and I'm going to be using the brand new Halloween Cupcakes stamp set from Pretty Pink Posh, which is part of their Halloween release. I'll also be using the layered spiderwebs stencil. It's a two-layer stencil that will make some spider webs with spiders, and I'll also be bringing in the Pretty Pink Posh sentiment strips, Halloween stamp set, and coordinating dies. And I love these two together. You have all of these Halloween sentiments that you can use on your cards, plus different dies that you can die cut them out from scalloped rectangles to straight edged rectangles and so many more. So I absolutely loved these Halloween cupcakes when I first saw them. They actually reminded me of Halloween cupcakes that I used to make with my kids when they were younger. We made a lot of cupcakes that looked so much like what I see here on the stamp set. So I had so much fun being able to stamp these out and color them and use them on a card. So I'm just curious to know, do any of you make Halloween cupcakes with your children or grandchildren? Leave me a comment below and let me know. So I'm actually going to be using all of these cupcakes. There are 6 cupcakes altogether, and I knew I wanted to use all 6 because they were all decorated so differently and uniquely. I loved each and every one of them. So you can totally just take one of these and put it on a card, or take 2 of these and put it on a card. But I'm going to use all 6, and I'm going to be making a slimline card today and have all 6 of the cupcakes going across the entire width of the card. So there will be links to the products that I used today in the video description. So if you're interested in these products, you can take a look down there. So I went ahead and stamped out all of the cupcakes onto some Bristol Smooth cardstock. And I'm using my Zig Clean Color Real Brush pens to color them up. And since these are water-based pens, I'm also using a water brush to blend the color. I chose to use all of the traditional Halloween colors for my cupcakes, such as the purple, black, orange, green, and yellow. And I'll have all of the colors listed on the coordinating blog post. So for this cupcake, I'm coloring the frosting green. I have the light green color on the edge, and then I came in with the fluorescent green right next to that. And then I'm going to take my water brush and spread this color with water so that it blends into a lighter color down towards the bottom of the cupcake. I did color the stars on that cupcake with my yellow. And for the ghost, I didn't want to keep it white, so I added a little bit of shading along the edge, and the shading is in the light gray color. I like using that light gray color when I'm trying to add some shading to white images, just so that they don't look so flat and there's a little bit of depth going on. So I just put some of the light gray along the edge and then spread that out. And then for the bottom of the cupcake, I'm using the deep violet and just putting some of the deep violet along the edges, and then I'll use the water brush to blend that color. I love using watercolors to color my images just because it makes it so easy, and especially if you're not that great at coloring, you can just lay down some color and then pull the rest of the color down to create a nice shading effect with your water brush. And if you don't have a water brush like I do, you can always use a paintbrush dipped in water. Make sure when you are using a water brush that you rinse the tip, or you blot the tip out on a paper towel when you go from one color to the next. Because right here with the cat cupcake, you can see that I'm using the black color for the face, but if I don't rinse the brush before I go into the orange, that orange will look black. So you want to make sure you're rinsing it between colors. And with the water brush, I simply just squeeze the barrel to get some water out on the tip, and then just blot it off on a paper towel, and then I'll come back in with the next color. So the oranges that I'm using for these stamps is the orange Zig marker. And I'm just using the orange here also on the frosting and putting a little bit there along the edges. And then I will come in with those little dots, which would be this little sprinkles, and color those up with the deep violet. And then I'll go ahead and blend the rest of the color out. So you can see how you can go from one color, which is the orange, to a lighter shade just by blending it with water. For the bats, I am going to use the black marker, and you can see that just by blending it with water, you get a light shade of gray for the rest of the bats. For the bottom of the cupcake, I'm using some of the deep violet, which that's the purple color, coloring some of those diamond shapes. And then for the diagonal stripes, I did some of the light green, and then filling in the rest with the black. The next cupcake is my favorite. It's this cupcake of a mummy, and I love this one. This definitely reminds me of one that I actually made with my kids when they were younger. And if you want to see them, you can head over to my Pinterest page at Lisa Mears Designs, because I do have pictures of those cupcakes posted up there. For this mummy cupcake, I did color it in the light gray and added the blender just to add a little bit of shading. And then I used the deep violet for the frosting. And then for the bottom, I'm using the orange. And for those polka dots, I used the fluorescent green. For the next cupcake, I used the light green around the edges. I love how cute this is with the little spider up there. I used the fluorescent green over top of that and extended it out towards the center, and then just used the water brush to blend those colors through the center. For the spider, I colored the legs in black, and then just around the edge there in the black around the center, but then brought the water brush towards the middle where the eyes and the mouth is, because I didn't want to color those in black. Obviously, you wouldn't be able to then see the eyes or the mouth, so I wanted to make sure it was just a light gray. I also used the black marker around the bottom of the cupcake, and then using the water brush to drag that color down for a shading effect. Also added that black on the inside of the spider web, so you can see that black through the spider web. And then the actual spider web, I'm going to color in orange, and I'm just going to color this entire spider web up in orange without adding the water brush. I'm not going to do any shading on the spider web itself. And I'll color the sprinkles in the orange and the deep violet. So there's all the cupcakes. I went ahead and die cut them off camera with the coordinating dies, but I'm going to move on to my slimline card background. So I have a piece of Bristol smooth cardstock that I cut to 8 1/4 by 3 1/4, and I'm adding the Distress Oxide Twisted Citron ink over that entire background. Next, I'm going to add the Distress Oxide Mowed lawn ink around the edges. This is a little bit of a darker green, which I'm adding just to the edges so that I'll still have that lighter green on the inside. After adding the Mowed lawn ink, I'll come back in with the Twisted Citron and just blend that out a little better, just going over the Mowed lawn and the Twisted Citron where they meet and blending that out. I'm going to add the layered spiderwebs stencil on top of this background. You can see that the stencil is a little bit shorter than the background, and that's perfectly fine. I could still use it to cover this slimline card layer. So what I've done is I've added the stencil to the left side of that card layer, and I just masked off the spiderwebs that are not full spiderwebs on the right side of that stencil. So the ones on the right side, you can see they're partially cut off. So I just masked those off because I don't want to have any partial spider webs in this area. And I'm going to go ahead and ink up the ones on the left of the stencil with the Hickory Smoke Distress Oxide ink. I was going for a subtle look of the spider web, so I'm using a light gray to add to this background. So once I add those spider webs to the left side of the card background, I'm just going to move that stencil over And I'm going to mask off the spider webs on the left side of the stencil that are not full spider webs, just so that I don't ink over those by mistake. And I'm going to add ink to the spider webs that are completely whole spider webs. Those are the ones in the middle of the stencil. And then the ones on the right side of the stencil, I'll still go ahead and ink up because those are the ones that are going to be on the right edge of the card layer. And once I finish inking up all of those spider webs, I'm going to add the second layer. The second layer of this stencil is all of the spiders, so I'm just going to line those up with the spider webs and add the same color ink, which is again the Hickory Smoke. So the entire stenciled background will be in the same color ink, which is that light gray color for a subtle appearance. I didn't want anything too bold because I'm going to be adding the cupcakes to the card, and I didn't want to distract too much from the main focal point of the card, which obviously would be the cupcakes. And notice that I'm not really worried about lining this stencil up the traditional way that you would line up a stencil. I'm just kind of taking a spider, putting it over one of the spider webs, and then inking it up with the ink. So it really doesn't matter which spider it is. Really, it just depends on which direction you want the spider to go, and some of those spiders are larger and some are smaller. So if you want a smaller one or a larger one on the spider web, really pick and choose. It's just easier to do it that way than trying to line it up. So now that all the stenciling is finished, I'm taking my sheer shimmer spritz in the frost color and I'm spritzing it on the background. And I'm going to take a paper towel, just put it over that background to pull some of that ink up. I'm going to spritz it one more time and then add the paper towel, press it down, and then lift up. You can see that it actually pulls some of that color up from the background for more of a distressed look, and it also adds a nice shimmer and sparkle to that background. Next, I'm going to use the Pretty Pink Posh Stitch Border 1 die. It's kind of like a zigzag stitched die. And I'm die cutting out of some purple cardstock. I'm just using some mint tape here to hold this onto the cardstock. After running it through the die cut machine one time, I'm going to remove the mint tape and remove the die, but I'm going to reposition the die so that it's at the end of the die cut line. Hold it down again with the tape and run it through my die cutting machine again. And that's going to allow me to get a slimline sized border from that one die. Because this die, when you die cut it, it's not going to cut out a slimline size because it's not a slimline size die, and I need it to be at least 8¼ inches long so that it will fit across the width of my card. I'm doing the same thing here with a piece of orange cardstock. So again, when you initially die cut it, you'll have to then reposition the die on the edge of the initial die cut piece, run it through a second time to get a longer die cut border. So now I have two borders, one in purple and one in orange, that I can use on my slimline card. Next, I have a piece of black cardstock and I'm going to stamp out a sentiment. I used some Versamark ink to stamp out my sentiment. I used the sentiment strips that I showed you earlier from the Halloween stamps, and this says no tricks, just treats. I added some white embossing powder and now I'm just heat setting it, and I'll use one of the dies from the coordinating dies to die cut this sentiment strip out. And I love that die set because there's so many different sentiment strip dies that you can use, some that have scalloped borders, some that have fishtail borders, some that have stitched borders and straight edged borders. I'm just using a straight edged die here. So now I'm ready to put the card together. I'm going to add the orange border at the bottom of my slimline card layer. Next, I'm going to add the purple border on top of the orange border. a little bit of the borders extended beyond the edges of the card layer, so I just snip them off. Next, I'm ready to add the cupcakes, and I'm just going to add them so that they are going across the entire width of that card. Once I have them how I want them, I'll go ahead and add glue to the backs, and then I'll also add the sentiment at the bottom center right over top of where the purple and the orange border meet. I'm going to add that layer to a piece of purple cardstock, and my purple cardstock measures 8.5 inches by 3.5 inches. So I'll have a little bit of that purple peeking out from all four edges. And then I'll add that to a slimline size card base. My card base is also 8.5 by 3.5 inches. So if you're interested in purchasing any of the products I used in my video today, there will be links down in the description box below, and I always appreciate when you use my links because it does help support me. So I hope you liked my card today, and if you did like this video, please click that thumbs up button. Thank you so much for watching, everyone, and have a great day. Bye-bye.